Well, we're composing this indoor image in a lovely central room here in Phil's home, where the light is pouring in from what I believe is the almost due east. Ready to go. Now we've got some very interesting light up here to work with. This is one of those cases where we almost have to incident meter this scene, trying to get a high reading out in Phil. Unless I'm mistaken out there, I don't think I'd know what to spot meter. It's there's all sorts of different grays and values out there. They're all high in value, but at best I could get an average value, and everything's closed up here. So we're going to try to incident meter this scene. Now, the high reading, this is where it's often handy for me to use a little white card and walk into the scene, which I carry right here with my meter. And of course that brings the subject of the, as you can see, I'm not sure if this shows or not, but you can see the card held this way is very gray, and these values behind are quite light. And this may be, here we go. And now we can use that meter position. We just kind of take a good look at it. We're going to put the meter right in that spot.
And Bill, when you do this, you probably should stand over here so that you're not blocking the reflection from the card.
Very good point. We have a fill card behind me that I forgot about.
Turn it right almost toward the light.
Here we go. As we cheat toward the light, it brings the relative values of these other materials down. There we go.
There you go.
And we're getting about 13.8, and that's in bright sunshine, and it's a value that doesn't seem unusual to me. We're looking, we want to get into the shadow, and again, we have a dark side of this card. The dark side being representative of textured black. We certainly don't want to work, we want to work on the shadow side here and keep this fill card in. So once again, it's a comparison kind of analysis we're doing. This personally tempted when using this technique to often bury the card too deep in the shadow. I have 8.3, 13.8, 8.3. The difference is 5.5. We have a 10.5. All right, so let's make a few entries here. I think we said the low value, which is still there, was 8.3. I love this machine. And the high value was 13.8. And there it is, 10.5 stops. This one, and now we're in a different kind, we're developing in DI13. And we're going to develop to what is beneath an average gradient, for me anyway, of a normal subject of 0.37, and that makes sense. And we're going to get some decent speed with this film of 91 lens diffraction. ExpoDev is giving me an exposure of 5.62 seconds. So
that includes a little reciprocity compensation.
Indeed. Anything over a second or two. So at f45. And another wonderful feature of ExpoDev, and I'm not saying this just to promote the product, I use this machine, is that we now have on the next screen a timer that presents 5.62 seconds, and it'll enable,
You want to spread up like this? Just a little ways.
Just a little ways.
Enough so you can hold it.
There. Can you hold that?
Yeah.
Okay. You're going to hear the timer. Here we go. 2, open. 1, 0. There we go.
Very good.
What we'll be determining first in this situation, once again, we want to know the subject brightness range we're going to be dealing with this particular scene. And the lights are being provided, in this case, by two flash units, a key unit up here and a fill to this side. And so It's the range that interests me because it's going to help us to determine the exposure we're going to be giving our negative. So first, we'll read for a high reading on the key side of our subject here. And I've attached the sync cord to my meter so that I can pulse the lights from here. And on this side, I have exactly F16, which is not the exposure we'll be using, but it's going to help us to determine our spread, our subject brightness range in stops. Let's keep F16 in mind on the key side, and then find a shadow, which is easy enough to do in this case. We'll get in a shadow behind the key light, behind our subject. And once again, pulse the flashes. And in this case, we have F8. So we have a difference of 2 stops from one side to the other of our subject. And that added to the normal 5 stops of the subject herself, in this case, is 7. So we have a relatively normal, exactly normal actually, subject here. And I have in my work in WinPlotter developed a notion of my own personal film speed, which in this case, as plotted in WinPlotter using my developer and my techniques, suggests that for a subject of 7 stops, my personal effective film speed is 400. Now, and I have been using that in the readings you've heard so far. But I'm going to use this meter in a different kind of way. It's really intended to read average light, but I'm going to be reading in the shadow side because this is what I want to base my exposure on. It's the shadow side. I want adequate exposure there. And because I'm using an incident meter in a shadow situation, which is not the normal way this meter is used, we're going to adjust the film speed. We're going to exactly double it, in this case to 800. So I will do that. And of course, this meter is of a type that automatically adjusted my aperture as I did that and is now suggesting F11. I'm going to double check that in the shadow side. And we have a aperture recommendation of F11, and that's where we'll make the exposure. We're going to fire one just to be sure that everything's working, including, okay, and the flash units are firing. We should be ready to go. Feeling okay? 1, 2, 3. And that should do it. With beautiful multicolored, what will be multi-toned leaves circulating slowly in dark water, and we're going to make that water even darker and minimize the reflection of the sky and the far trees with a polarizing filter, which we've just looked through and brought the value of the water way down so that the leaves now are the entire story. Once again, I'm going to cheat a little bit with my white card. The sun, in this case, is up behind a tree, so we have some portions of this scene that are lit up and others that are in moderate shade, which is quite nice. It produces a nice effect, but I think I can find the sun easily enough with my card. So it's easy enough to find an illuminated position.
It doesn't have to be in front of the camera necessarily.
There we go, but
it's in a direction parallel to the camera line of sight.
Okay, and this looks pretty good. Right where we are. I'm trying to keep my hand from reflecting too much on here. We look at the dome to make sure we're in the light. 13.9, 13.9 this time of day seems perfectly reasonable. Shadow reading in this case can also, I think, be done right in my own shadow quite easily. Once again, since I am tempted for whatever reason to bury the card too deep, I kind of tend to watch it when it's in my shadow. Right here, right here, and I think that should do it. 10.3, 13.9, 10.3. We've got a 120 lens to get a nice composition, 400 Tmax. Our subject brightness range is very reasonable, so we don't need to worry about any extremes of subject brightness range. We said that low value was 10.3, I believe, and the high was 13.3. We're going to read it again. That happens. 13.6, I believe we said, but let's do it again. Meter twice, expose once. And I think I want to stop down just maybe one more.
Good idea.
Okay. Because I've got a field of, this thing is focused out over the water, and I've made an adjustment for focus, but I want to be sure about depth of field. That's giving me a ½ second, which I don't think will be problematic. Things have slowed down out there. 22 1/6. Again, trying not to move the camera any more than is necessary.
The ground is a little unsteady.
It's very unsteady here. Okay, we'll keep ourselves very still on the way, and everything out there looks fairly still, so the light's coming up nicely. I think we have it.
Well, how would you meter this normally?
Well, normally I would tend toward incident metering the scene because I can walk into it for one thing, and secondly, there are a lot of complex shapes and tones out there that I think might be difficult to meter, especially the high end. In the distant background, we have what I think is a fairly easy low value, zone 3, and possibly the very top. Well, it's outside my image of this. The high value is just tough.
But even that it's probably too small.
Yeah.
To read accurately with a spot.
Exactly. And I have backlit leaves, which to me anyway have always been kind of a challenge. I wouldn't really know where to place those.
Yeah, their color, that's always a little hard to interpret.
So
well, whichever you're comfortable with.
Well, let's once again, I'm going to use my little card as kind of a cheating device here, because we want these leaves to be lit up nicely, but still to have texture, obviously. But the edges of them will light up, have a relatively high value. So I think what I'd like to do is to walk this white card out into the scene a little bit. Phil has reminded me, and I appreciate these reminders, that we have a flat card here and that the meter has a hemispheric dome on it, so it's not an exact replica of what the meter will be seeing, but it can get us close. Looks like it's going to be held if we angle that meter back.
Almost flat.
Almost flat, which if you watch the dome, it's illuminating.
Get it out. There you go.
Yeah, and again, you can watch the line of the light come across that dome, and you can see it there about halfway across. So let's take a reading. We have a 14.4 reading.
Okay.
So our next reading is the low value.
In this area, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And once again, we can use the card. Keep an eye on this card and the background, and the card right here is clearly, it's textured black, and the background is lighter. And so we've got the texture in the background right about here that looks about right to me. Yeah. I don't think we need to dig any deeper. So the high reading again was 14.4. Please help me remember that, guys. 10.4. So we've got exactly 4 stops. And an SBR of about 9 in a backlit situation. Very reasonable to me. All right, so